Hello, Bob Hughes here with JD Squared, and what we're going to talk about in this video is parts that are coming out of the machine of the incorrect size, undersize or oversize, or the holes are too big or they're too small than what you expected from the drawing. Let's go ahead and to illustrate this, let's open up a drawing that I have created, Cutter Comp Behavior 2, and let's bring it in. And this particular part has numerous errors in it. Now, first thing before we get to those, let's look at what we're seeing right here. And what we're seeing is red, white, yellow, red, etc. SheetCam does a operation on a single layer. So if you were to pick a layer and say, I want you to cut out all the elements on that layer, it will start as an outside profile and then figure the next thing inside it would be an inside profile like a hole, and then it'll go back to outside, etc. And that's what you're seeing here. Now the white is donating what's called an open contour. And an open contour is what you see here, where the start point and the end point are not the same. So you could start here on this triangle and go here, 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 and you're back to where you were. So it is a closed contour, same with the circle, same with the outside, but this and this are called open contours. Let's go ahead and illustrate some of the issues here by creating just go ahead and create a program that's going to cut it. We need to first, of course, open our tool set, and we have a PowerMax 85 in this example, 45 amp shielded mild steel. Tools we want, we bring it in, and there's all your tools right there. Notice in the tool set we have the magic marker of the Excel marker system and the scribe and all. Let's go ahead and create an operation. And normally what you're going to do is you're going to create almost all of your programs are going to start with an outside offset because it assumes you're going to want to cut the outside peripheral to the correct dimension. Now you're going to pick your layer. There's only one layer, color 7, so that's pretty easy. And then you got to pick your tool, and right here it's already 0598, which is 16 gauge, and it has a kerf width of 55. We are going to want to lead in, and a lead in is when, remember, the torch blows in off the side of the part, feeds in, and then starts cutting. We do not want to lead out because we are plasma cutting. So we say okay. Now, we've thrown two errors here, and what has happened, the top error says open pass were not offset. It's talking about these right here, because how can you offset the cutter off to one side when you don't know what the inside or the outside is? So that's what that warning is. It's not an error, it's actually a warning. Now this right here, some features were too small to machine. It's talking about that white slot right there. And what I did in this drawing, let's turn off show true width and show toolpaths. I created this drawing 40,000, this slot 40 thousandths of an inch wide to illustrate that it can't be cut because our kerf over here is 55 thousandths of an inch wide, so we simply cannot cut it. And in a minute here, I'll show you your two possible solutions to this problem. But right now, let's go back to our cutter. If you notice, we had the circle, the hole inside the peripheral, looks like a shock tab or a bracket. And then we had another hole inside it. Well, it obviously can't cut this hole inside it. It's just not going to work. So the answer is we have to get rid of one of these holes. The way to do that in SheetCam, go to Mode, Edit Contours, select it, or I'm sorry, if you move your cursor over an element, you see them turning white, that means they're selected. Right click on it, delete the element. Now, if we still have our warnings because we haven't fixed the open contour or the other slot, let's go back up, bring the tool pass. Now you see what she's cutting correctly, right? It's cutting the inside hole, the outside, but it's cutting these as slots. Now, as an example, let's say you didn't want this particular element to actually cut with the torch. You wanted to use your scriber. What we need to do, since SheetCam does an operation on an entire layer, it will do everything on that layer. We got to move this to another layer. So we're going to right click on it. We're going to move to new layer. Let's call it scriber. And we'll say okay. Now, let's go ahead and create an operation. This time, we're going to say we want the no offset, because with the scriber, you don't want offset inside or outside. You want to faithfully reproduce the image, so you'll have no offset. Then we're going to pick the scriber layer, and then we're going to pick the tool will be the actual scriber. It'll say 80 inches. We do not want to lead in. It's not going to matter anyway because you have no offset. So if you say okay, now if we were to turn on our tool or show our tools again, you could see where this is green, right? It's a very thin green because it's a scriber. Now, if we turn off the outside ones, you can see it's the only green. And that pretty much tells you that we now have another operation we're scribing, you know? All right, one thing about this here real quick. Let's say this part is going to be dimensionally correct because we do have cutter comp inside or outside. Now, another thing that could affect your size was if in your cutting tables, the kerf width of 55 was an incorrect number. Let's say it was really cutting 65, 10 thou wider. Well, you have to tell SheetCam it's 65 so that it could correctly offset the tool path to get the right part. Now, let's say you cut this part out, and let's look at this triangular slot here, and you measured it from here to here, and it's a larger distance. You expected the distance from here to here. Here's what happened. As she was coming down the kerf with the torch, it necked down to where that 55 thou kerf width can no longer fit into this area, so it just went back up the other path. That is the problem right there. Now, if you wanted that triangle all the way down, there's a relatively simple fix for it, and once again, it involves layers. We could right-click, we move our cursor over it, right-click, move to a new layer, and let's create a new layer called No Offset. There we go. Now, notice it went red, right? Because it's on a new layer. It's the only component on it, so it figures it's an outside profile. If we were to create a new operation for that, let's pick the No Offset. That's what we want. And we're going to pick the No Offset layer, and we're going to pick our tool, our torch, 16 gauge steel. We want let's put the lead in, and it won't matter on no offset. But anyway, let's go like that. Now let's see our tool pass back, and you can see right here we're cutting, and we've got a lead in on the inside, and we're cutting no offset right around it. Now this distance is much shorter. That's probably what you're expecting. It's going to be half of 55 thou less here because of the curve, but that's probably what you were expected right there. Now, if we go back to inside offset, obviously it gets short again. Now, let's take a look at the issue of this particular slot right here. Remember, it was too thin. We couldn't cut it. There's two solutions. One, you go back into your original geometry. Let's turn off the cutting pass, and you draw it as a line, and then you tell SheetCam, I want you to cut that as a slot. Now, keep in mind, it won't be 40 thou anymore. It's going to be the width of the kerf, which in this case, SheetCam figures is 55 thou. The other solution would be to move it to another layer if you don't really care about the dimensions of the slot. You just want a slot, and you don't want to mess around with the drawing. Well, let's just go pick our no offset layer right there, and let's do that. Now, bring it back up, and there's your slot. Now, the slot is not 40 thou wide. You got half the kerf on this side, half the kerf on this, plus 40. So you have 55 for the kerf plus 40. You're a 95 thousandths of an inch wide slot, and that may be acceptable to you. All right, now let's go ahead and let's take a look at the outside. You've measured the outside of your part. You've got a multi-layer drawing, and the dimensions are not working out. You know, what is going on? So let's turn off this, turn off that. Now, this particular part right here, we are going to call, we're going to move it to a new layer, and we're just going to call it, you know, outer profile. Let's do that. Is that, learn how to spell profile, Bob. Outer profile. I got CDO, so I have to correct these capitalization. Okay, anyway, it's on its own layer. If we were to go back and look at our tool paths and everything, we're not even cutting it no more because remember the operation operated on that layer. Well, we move this item off that layer. Now, something interesting just happened, and this could be a real gotcha. Right here, since this went to a new layer, SheetCam goes outside to inside. It moved this to an outside. You got a lead in. This is absolutely not what you wanted. Now, the way you could fix that quickly is go to the color 7 operation and change the lead in, the cutter comp back to ID. Now you're cutting your hole correctly. You're cutting everything correctly, right? Let's go ahead and assign an operation to the outer profile. So if we go over here to our op tool, This time though, we're going to put inside offset, and we're going to say the outer profile. We got our torch, and we want a lead in. Look what happened. We cut inside the line. You can see by the green line here in the arrows, we're inside the line, and we blew a lead in right here. Well, that's clearly not what we expected, because if I right click on the background in SheetCam, I select the measure tool. Well, if you're measuring, let's go ahead and bring up the true width. If you were to measure from, hold down my left button, and I go to here, you know, we're out about almost 190, which makes sense because the part was 2 inches wide, and we decided that, you know, the kerf width is 55 thou, so on the inside and on both sides, that adds up to 110 thou. Subtract it from your 2 inches, and you got, you know, 1.89 inches. That's why you're undersized. Now, the way to fix that would be to change that offset back to outside offset, and now you can see we're correcting we're doing the correct part. One key thing to remember is when you are creating operations, the last thing you want to do is cut the outer peripheral, because if we were to move this operation, I held it down with my left button, my left mouse, and I dragged it up, right? Well, let's go over here to simulate, and look what's going to happen. We're going to speed it up a little bit. Simulation, yeah, whatever. Let's see. Oh, that was setup. I'm sorry. We say, look what it's going to do. It just, I better slow that bad boy down. All right, let's stop it, and then let's start it. If you notice, she's cutting the outside first because the operation is first. That's a no-no, because we've just cut our part out of your sheet, so it really can't do any of these inside operations. So let's stop that, and it's going to be very important to make sure that your outside operation is the last operation you cut. For instance, you would probably want the scriber to be the possibly the first operation, and I'm just holding it down, dragging it, dropping it. And then if you look now to find out what your operations would be, let's unselect these, and let's select the first operation, scriber. There it goes, green, right? Now let's select the inside contour. It's going to cut your hole. It's going to cut this line right here. Now we're going to go over here, and we're going to say no offset, and we're going to cut these out. And then lastly, we're going to cut the outside. Now, if you got tired of looking at this warning right here, once again, it's because of this element right here. Let's turn off simulation. Let's see. We got to go back to mode, edit contour mode. Let's go ahead and just take this right here and move it to the no offset line. And if you notice, we lost some of our errors right there. They're not, the warnings aren't showing up, because if we turn back on our stuff here, except could not fit the lead in on some outlines. It's talking about that one right there. In fact, if you want to see, if I move over it, you can see. Well, if that's the case right there, let's go look at that layer, which is the, I believe it's no offset layer. Now it's the no offset layer. And let's just take a look at that layer, that feature, and see we have a lead in right here. Let's turn the lead in off, and the error will go away. Now if we bring up our cutting pass, this is pretty much what we wanted, right? You know, we got our scribe here, we're cutting our slot, we've got everything correct. The last operation, of course, is the outer peripheral, and this part is pretty well fixed and ready to go cut. Anyway, I hope that answers some of your questions. Thank you for watching, and happy cutting.